Hello YouTube. What do Today I'm going to talk about a little proposal out in California. Ask anyone around how they protect themselves and they will most likely tell you two things, or from STDs and HIV, and you'll get two different things: abstinence and condoms. So now, starting with the Bush administration backwards, abstinence, only sex education has been a staple of sex education, especially in places like historically southern and in a lot of purplish states like West Virginia. It's kind of blue here, red there, but primarily purplish. And some especially deep red states like Louisiana, Georgia, and Texas. But there's one place where just say no to sex doesn't work, other than the teenage brain: jail. Jail is an alternate reality. It's almost like a gladiator arena where the weak are picked on and subjected to what is sexual slavery or any other form of slavery that they may be subjected to. It is a very different reality, and sex is like currency or a commodity, perhaps. It is a reality. So when facing this reality, or at least we joke about it, we talk about prison rape all the time. Big Bubba, Nasty Nate, Tricky Dicky. We use them as punchlines and a cautionary tale to what will happen should you end up in prison. Watching things like Lockdown, especially those who may never go to jail or never want to experience that, we have somewhat of a curiosity with things like that. Which is why men in Texas, Ohio, North Carolina are the foremost experts on women's reproductive health. Which is why they're the experts also on sex and how right or wrong it is. They're the experts on contraception, abortion, Sharia law, basically everything they ignore the experts on. Their so-called conscience dictates everything, including what goes on in prisons around this country. They are criminals deserving of all they get. That's the attitude. If they get raped, they get raped. They're the scum of the earth. And so any other prisoners groups or hazard prevention groups that come in to advocate on behalf of those prisoners are spurned by the corrections field, because they're giving power to the prisoners and it will upset the balance of it. So there's one thing that's causing controversy. This thing. I'm a Trojan man. I like Trojans. Trojans are awesome. It's a little square thingy. It comes in a package. Maybe it's about like 2 inches by 2 inches, 4 square feet or inches whatsoever. And it's called a rubber Jimmy glove, baby baggie, cap, balloon, sheath. Whatever it is called, we see the controversy everywhere. People don't want condoms in school because they feel it would sexualize children, namely teenagers who are thinking about sex and talking about sex and even having sex. And most of the time, the things that they're getting about sex are wrong. The abstinence-only sex education crowd only has anecdotal evidence to say it works. And all studies done on any state that widely uses abstinence education, and are often more religious states like Texas, Louisiana, Georgia, and North Carolina, you will see high teen pregnancy rates and more likely religious-inspired laws. The reason I have set this up is because of the larger context behind the backdrop of condoms in prisons. If we can't talk openly about homosexuality, if we can't openly talk about sexuality, period. If we can't talk about medically accurate facts of sex in the halls of government, we have to talk about them without having ulterior motives. Remember the young lady who was threatened by her principal for objecting to a mandated abstinence assembly with Pam Stenzel, an evangelical preacher whose dramatic presentation made Glenn Close from Fatal Attraction look like Mrs. Claus? The same reception she got was trying to dismiss it and call it ridiculous. So, with this setup, I move to the so-called controversy of providing condoms in prisons. Prison sex is expressly forbidden by law, but again, we know what happens, or at least it's expressly forbidden by prison rules. When Obama proposed putting condoms in prisons, Republicans responded by saying it costs too much money. Of course, they're also against health care and knows that it'll cost more to treat infectious diseases behind bars, but that cost isn't one they care about, nor the cost of not offering them. Yes, Most sex behind bars is forced, coerced against the will. One state has condoms given out by the nurses, and they are told that they will get help if they are being forced. So many objectors ask, why would they use condoms when raping someone? You forget, criminals are very resourceful. Also, prison guards often knows who's sex and who the alpha male is. So even with the whole prison sex is against the rules nonsense, guards just want to do their job, get their shift over with, and go home. Ending forced prison rape at least starts, I believe, with condoms. I feel that every prisoner should have a dozen condoms in their welcome basket, and they should get more, maybe 6 to 12 at a time for a nurse. I would also suggest a log so that if someone is taking too many of them within a short period of time, that you can bet dollars to donuts they're either a high sex drive pairing going on, or a ring is happening. So it can help protect the weaker prisoners, first timers, the smaller, more vulnerable kids who might look feminine, all that. My guess is that they can know that this will lead them to actually putting an end to forced sexual conduct, and they believe that it could unnecessarily put them at risk on the job. I don't believe that in Vermont or any other state implementing condom policies we've seen this happening. I would also have to look up stats, but if condoms and sex prohibitions are working, then tell me, why do we have an HIV ward in prison? Why are HIV and STD rates climbing? Why next, when those inmates are released, what do? Do they suddenly become our responsibility again? Because now they're out in society? It's no longer us punishing them now that they're out of prison, but unethical treatment of prisoners has led to unique experiences that could incur recidivism or regression that feeds the prison industrial complex, and more exposure to HIV and STDs. So when they're out on the streets, they hear get tested, but behind bars, abstinence only, no gay sex allowed. But the guards can probably count on one hand who's completely abstinent, and it also depends on the security level too. We must end the no condom policy for the sake of the men and women behind bars, and the sake of the men and women that they come home to. See you later, YouTube.